beefing up their powers to deal with the potential risk and educate. There's some education programs that are coming on board. But most importantly, I think the highest risk for us is keeping it out of the hands of young people.
And of course, there are penalties that are built in to ensure that that is covered, that, you know, there are penalties for persons who break the law, who offend the law, that they will be punished accordingly as prescribed by the law. That leads with that. Okay, so as you mentioned, AG, in terms of the industry and its projected growth globally, let's talk a bit then about the potential benefits now of a medicinal cannabis industry here for St. Kitts and Nevis.
Let me start with the possible highest level that we can go. Imagine there is an international company that has discovered that there's a special strain of cannabis in St. Kitts and Nevis, which provides a type of THC that is particular to our jurisdiction. And they wish to use that THC for a beverage, a cannabis-infused beverage. Say a huge company like Pepsi Cola or Coca-Cola. And they said, listen, this place, this island in this place in the world has this special type of cannabis. And this is what we want to use for our product, which we're going to market throughout the world. Imagine the economic benefits of that to the cultivators, to the transporters, to the manufacturers of that cannabis. They would have a marketplace. And that is when we were having the public discussions, that is the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is to reach that point. But there's so much below that ultimate goal that we could provide opportunities for persons in this industry. You have the growers. You have the persons who can actually take the cannabis and convert it into a product for sale, for medicinal purposes. You have the persons who can transport. You have the lab techs. You have the lounge owners. All of those persons can participate in this new economy of medicinal cannabis. So you have revenue generation, you have job creation, agriculture, pharmaceuticals, research, stimulus for small businesses, cooperatives, and so forth. So those are the potential economic benefits. It's literally an industry it's an agricultural industry, from growth to testing to then sale. And there are persons who can participate in any part of that chain and have an opportunity to develop their own business. And there are examples throughout the world of persons who become very successful in the medicinal cannabis industry. Doctors can benefit. There could be certain doctors that will be qualified to grant the medicinal prescription for the medicinal cannabis, and they will benefit from that as well. We have a large cruise sector. We have almost 1 million passengers. There are a lot of persons who come on cruise ships who do have anxiety, depression. You know, they suffer from different types of disease. I wanted to list a couple more: sickle cell anemia, anxiety, chronic pain, Alzheimer's, hepatitis B, Crohn's, Dravet syndrome. There's so many different types of illnesses that you can treat with cannabis. So there's a big market out there.
Right. Okay. And so it's an important point that you mentioned, AG, and I think it will lead me next to speak about partnerships. And of course, none of you here represent the Ministry of Agriculture, but I want to take the example of the peppers that St. Kitts and Nevis currently has with Tabasco Company, which is based in Louisiana. That's through the relationship that the government has formed here. And we see here our local farmers are now providing peppers successfully to Tabasco. And so those are the type of partnerships that you're talking about.
Yes, you produce something and there's a market elsewhere. And everybody in between, from start to finish, benefits.
So is there that discussion taking place with any international company, any of the international partners, whether it be agency or company or any individuals who can help to do that type of research to discover the type of strain that we have here?
There's been a lot of interest expressed, nothing concretized as yet, because there is a lot of interest. But it's going to be important for us to establish those kinds of partnerships for export purposes, but I never want us to lose sight of the potential it could have locally as well. a lot of we've had discussions with a lot of growers and people who are already in the industry, and they essentially are, some persons have expressed concern. I can't afford to do all of this by myself. So we've really been pushing the idea of people partnering with each other. And why can't 5 of you together one of you do something on each part of the chain to make sure that, you know, the money that's generated from your enterprise, you gain more income and you have a bigger profit share. So it's a great opportunity, I think, for young men in particular, because that is the demographic we see most expressing interest in the industry, for them to establish themselves professionally and really get themselves together to really make greater benefits for themselves here in St. Kitts and Nevis as well.
Is it a difficult sell? There is that statement that Kittitians and Nevisians, we don't necessarily work well together. We prefer to, and we see there are many examples in society of
right.
persons from different backgrounds who are working together. But in this the mentality here of St. Kitts and Nevis is not necessary to work together.
It's a hard sell, but I think once we just need an example, you know. Once we have a very good example, and that might just be 5 people. Once we have a great example, I think it's going to catch on more. Because if you have $10,000, I have $10,000, we could now buy a $20,000 piece of equipment. Whereas how long it would take for you to get the 20 or me to get the 20. So it's a strategic move that we hope that persons in St. Kitts and Nevis are going to take seriously, building the mechanisms to help with transparency and accountability and those sorts of issues so that it doesn't go sour. But it's something that we hope people will take into serious consideration. The industry offers so many opportunities for our local farmers, so we hope that they will take full benefit from it.
It's particularly the traditional farmers who work together. You know, so there is talk that our people can't come together and form businesses, but a lot of the traditional growers already were in partnerships and cooperatives in that industry, even though it was not a legal industry, but they work together. So why now that it's regulated, it's organized, they can't also work together? So I believe that different groups are going to come together and they're going to take advantage. For example, in the Rastafari Rights Recognition Act, which we passed in 2023, one of the reparatory parts of that act was that any registered Rastafari group does not have to pay for any of the licenses under the medicinal cannabis regime, so that they can take full advantage of the regime. We felt that that was important because they were traditional growers for many years, decades, and they were the ones that brought the fight to the courts to recognize cannabis as something that is beneficial, something that is sacramental. And it's because of their fight that we're here to this point. If it wasn't their push, we might not have had been in the embryonic stages, the infancy stages of a medicinal cannabis industry. So we want them to be able to take advantage of that.
Right. And also in terms of assistance for persons who would be offered now, who are, as you mentioned, the persons working together, for instance, like a pricing structure. That is something that is very important because the age you mentioned, our traditional farmers, there seems to be everyone would sell whatever they want, the same product at whatever they feel like, which sort of undermines the market because, of course, if you go to the supermarket, you know what you're going to pay. As opposed to you go to a farmer here, you go to a farmer there, and there's some persons who just lose out on the opportunity, not to mention as well to their products spoiling on them. Of course, I'm talking about the traditional farmers as well too. So that type of assistance, so getting them on board, getting everybody thinking of the same mindset, that will be a huge task.
It's a huge task, but I don't know if it was by coincidence. I doubt it was, but we see that the minister is also the minister responsible for cannabis is the Minister of Agriculture, who is also responsible for the Department of Cooperatives,
Right.
who is also responsible for the Small Business and Entrepreneurship Ministry. So we see those connections and partnerships are already existing under the same umbrella as cannabis.
It was an accident, by the way.
I'm sure. So we can rest assured that the resources will become available to help persons in that way.
Yeah.
So then, go ahead.
Sorry, just to add to that point, that is really why the move was there. To move, because originally the Cannabis Act was under the Prime Minister's office. And we moved it to the Ministry, Agriculture, Cooperative, Small Business, because they're all interconnected. Every part of that ministry plays a role in being able to have a successful medicinal cannabis authority. And there's no reason why cooperatives can't be formed to take advantage of the industry, particularly from the cultivation aspect of it.
Right. Okay, so it's a question then that leads to the next question, and you use the term AG embryonic. Where are we with the establishment of the medicinal cannabis industry?
Well, it's established. There's a board in place. There's an office, and it's functioning. The launch, what you saw, the clip at the beginning, was the official launch of the office being opened. So they can receive questions, they can receive applications. It's basically fully functional. Just from a historic perspective, the Act was passed in 2020, but never operationalized. Parts of the Act were. The authority part and the amendments which allowed it to actually come into force and the adjustments to the board and so forth were done in 2023. And then time was taken then to formulate, get everything in order, which was just short of 2 years before the actual implementation. So now it's ready.
And it's still growing.
Yes.
Still growing.
But it's not
yes.
embryonic. It's actually birthed now.
Yes.
It's an infant now.
Yes.
So it's going to start walking and start running hopefully soon, so that we can take it. And you have to do these things right. Some people, I hear people say, "Oh, we've been talking about this for so long." But things like this take time because you want to get it right. And the advantage we have is that we have been able to learn from the mistakes of our CARICOM neighbors. Jamaica has an industry, St. Vincent has an industry, Antigua has an industry.
Right.
So we were able to learn and partner with them because it's not really a competition. All of us are trying to find our footing. Partner with them, look at what mistakes they have made and organize so we don't make the same mistakes. So when we start running, we're not tripping. We're going straight for the 100-meter finish line. So that's where we are right now. But I also want to say, it's also important because when we took office, the cannabis laws were all over the place.
And that was in 2022.
2022.
August 2022.
So there was a 2019 judgment. There were certain minor amendments that were made in response to that judgment, and it was all over the place. So that is why we gathered for months and months. I did a lot of work. My team did a lot of work. We worked with the entities that existed for the authority then, the minister, cabinet had lots of debates about how we're going to make this thing round. And we feel that we've done that. We have amended the Cannabis Act, which deals with medicinal. We have created the Rastafari Rights Recognition Act, which deals with the constitutional issues that were exposed in the Ras and Kofa decision in 2019. We did the Smoking Designated Areas Act, to tell people, listen, you should only smoke anything, not just cannabis, in designated areas. We also did amendments to the Criminal Records Act, so that all cannabis-related cultivation and possession offenses where persons got less than 3 years as their sentence, their records were expunged. We did amendments to the Drug Prevention and Abuse Act to deal with the 5 trees and the 56 grams being ticketable. We did the freedom of conscience legislation, which also dealt with the constitutional issues, because one of the constitutional issues in the Ras Sankofa case wasn't just Rastafari use. It was personal freedom of conscience use in your private space. Adults, by adults. So we dealt with that with the freedom of conscience. So you could get your freedom of conscience license, and you could legally, for your conscience purposes, in the privacy of your home, grow your 5 trees and have your 56 grams, so that you can partake in the privacy of your home. So we wanted to do all of that, get that clear. We created a PR campaign. We created the Cannabis Clarity SKN.com, which has all of the details of all the different regimes there. And now, after all of that, there's some clarity. I know it's not perfect. There's still people who are a little confused as to what you can and cannot do. I encourage those persons to go to CannabisClaritySKN.com. Spent a lot of time getting the frequently asked questions, getting all the details in a very easy way to understand what is the realm we're working in, and now is a chance now to monetize through the industry. So that's the history as to where we are. We wanted to get everything enclosed, everything clear, so that now we could take advantage of the medicinal cannabis industry.
A question that pops up often, AG, as you mentioned, in terms of designated spaces for smoking or vaping, as the case may be, and also for the ticketing system, is that when will those things officially be, I wouldn't necessarily want to say, well, I don't think we have any place, or perhaps you should tell me, do we have any designated spaces?
Yes,
of course, the music festival.
The High Rise was the first one.
Right.
There were other FET promoters who got licenses for smoking areas. I remember there was a FET in Nevis. I can't remember exactly the promoter, but there was a designated smoking area. It's just for the persons to do it. There are tickets. The police have tickets. I think it's a $500 ticket if you smoke anything, vape, cannabis, cigarettes, anything you smoke, not in a designated area, because you had to do that to protect people's health. There's lots of asthmatic people in the Federation. You can't be in an enclosed place smoking, because you could kill someone. So we had to protect people. We're encouraging the restaurant owners, the bar owners, to go and make your application to the CMO. The fire department comes, the CMO comes, they examine the place, you designate an area, then they can issue a license for you to have a designated smoking area where persons can smoke freely. More than likely it'll be downwind, so it doesn't impact the other patrons. We're encouraging persons to take advantage. That's been there for 2 years. Some persons have applied. As usual, things take a while for full compliance, but some are compliant, some are not. We're going to do our best with the help of the police to make sure that we haven't taken this strong arm approach, but we look at the music festival. It's a perfect example. You had the assistant ACP come and say, listen, this is what we will tolerate at the music festival. You could bring your 5 pre-rolls, you could go into the high-rise area. I went into the crowd, I still saw people smoking. But there are always people who, don't necessarily follow the rules. But at the end of the day, I think as time goes by, we will fully understand how it works, and we'll have a comprehensive appreciation of what this is supposed to be.
Okay, and Ms. Williams, of course, talk to us, Ms. Williams Knight, talk to us a bit about the Medicinal Cannabis Board and the Medicinal Cannabis Authority, those two institutions, agencies, etc. Should I say, tell us a bit about what they are and how they work together.
So the authorities is the overall institution that is responsible for regulating the medicinal cannabis industry. It is headed by a board of directors, and then there will be a CEO, and other support staff. So for the board of directors, I think we have the record of perhaps having the largest statutory board. There's space for 15 people on that board. There are 13 on the board currently. A mix of persons from the public and persons from specific government agencies. So for example, I'm the representative of the AG's office. For the Attorney General, we have representatives from health, the police, customs, and someone who I'm forgetting right now, but it's 5 persons from government agencies. So we have a mix of policy, persons who are involved in policy, and 8 people from the public who will give us insight into, what's happening on the ground, how the industry should develop. We have representation from the Organization of Rastafarian Unity as one of those 8 people. So there is an eclectic mix of persons on the board who is responsible for crafting the policies and developing the rollout of how things will happen. We will also be responsible for reviewing applications, granting licenses, revoking licenses, going through compliance, conducting compliance tests, because we have to make sure that people are doing cultivation and production in accordance with the law. So there are a number of different elements that we have to oversee as the Medicinal Cannabis Authority to ensure that we have an industry that works in accordance with the law and benefits the people.
Okay, and those categories, those licensing that you just mentioned, of course, so that's very important, and we're going to run through them. But before we do that, we're going to take a break at this time. And AG, it should mention to you, persons looking and listening, they'll be able to hear you speak a bit to what you mentioned, you hinted at earlier in terms of the comprehensive debate. You spoke about the many debates that took place in Cabinet during the discussion and the developments of the Cannabis Act and some of the changes that will make. So we're going to take our first break and allow persons to hear that. And of course, that was also at the launch of the Medicinal Cannabis Authority back in April. So viewers, listeners, stay right there. We'll be right back with more In Focus.
The entire regime is now set for us. The table is set. It's for us to be responsible and to take advantage and to make an industry and to create jobs, to create economic opportunities, and potentially reach that utopia of Liamigua and Owali having a special type of cannabis that has a special medicinal purpose that can change the economy of our country. And I can tell you this openly, the debates that we had in Cabinet about the cannabis legislation was some of the best debates we have had since we have taken office. It's an important industry, it's an important matter, and the goal of this country is to diversify our economy, to give opportunities to our people, to be able to, for them to reach their full potential.
Welcome back to In Focus. We continue our discussion with the Attorney General, the Honorable Garth Wilkin, and Mrs. Jean Williams-Knight, who is the chair of the Medicinal Cannabis Board. And our discussion today is on the medicinal cannabis industry and its creation here in St. Kitts and Nevis and getting it off the ground into the stage where we could see it beginning to walk and run, AG, as you mentioned. And so, Ms. Knight, we spoke about the different licensing, and really and truly, we can have an entire 2 shows on this topic, but unfortunately, we only have just under 30 minutes left. So we want to run through them a bit quickly, and there are 9 licenses that persons can apply for. And this AG refers to where you spoke about the opportunities for persons to get involved in terms of the economic benefits. And so we want to start, Ms. Knight, with transport. Tell us a bit about that.
Well, I want to explain the licenses in a particular context. I've found in the town hall meeting this helps. So how is this industry intended to work? So a patient who is suffering with one of the conditions that we mentioned earlier would be able to go to their doctor. Their doctor would write them a prescription, just the same way that your doctor would write your prescription for, I don't know, metformin or high blood pressure medication or whatever. And so they will write you a prescription, and then you go to either a dispensary or a lounge where you'll be able to access the cannabis. Now, that's essentially how it's going to work. But so the licenses come in because at every point in that chain, you're going to have to get the people who are responsible for it are going to have to get permission and have to be regulated to make sure that at the end of the day, that the cannabis that is in the lounges and the the dispensaries are safe. That is number one. So there's a license, for example, if somebody wants to do a testing facility. So testing is a huge component of the entire industry, because we have to be sure that it is safe. We have to be sure of the THC or the CBD content. We have to be sure that it is free of heavy metals and other harmful impacts. So there's a license for someone who wants to open a testing facility. There is also a license for someone who wants to do research. So maybe, as the AG was speaking of earlier, somebody who perhaps finds a particular strain and they want to test to see the impacts of the Kitishan strain of cannabis on epilepsy. So somebody who wants to conduct that type of research, they could do that sort of license. So those are the two outliers. But then now we talk about where's the cannabis going to come from? That's going to be in the dispensary and the lounge. That's going to be grown. So there's going to be a license for cultivation. The cultivation license is available for someone who wants to grow medicinal cannabis and supply dispensaries and lounges. Now, how is the cannabis going to move from your farm to the dispensary? What if police stop you on the way to the dispensary? But if you have a transportation license, you'll be able to show the police officer that you are an authorized cultivator or an authorized dispensary owner or lounge owner. So you have the legal right to transport cannabis. So that's what the transportation license is for. So now we have the cannabis. Now the cannabis has been grown. It has been transported wherever. What are we going to do with it? Are we going to be using raw cannabis? Are we going to process it into oils and topical ointments? This is where you have now the processor and extraction license. So somebody who wants to be able to get cannabis from a cultivator, but they just want to extract oils or process cannabis, they can do that through that license. There's also a similar production license called the infused products manufacturer license. So this is for people who want to do things like gummies or other applications that involve the infusion of cannabis beverages and things of that nature. So you have that license for persons who want to manufacture cannabis infused products. And then of course we mentioned the dispensary and the lounge. And what's the difference between a dispensary and a lounge? A dispensary is like a pharmacy. So you would be able to go to a dispensary and give them your prescription from your doctor, and they give you the cannabis as prescribed, and you can take it back home if you go to a dispensary. But you could also go to a lounge where you would take your prescription and they would give you the cannabis, but you use the cannabis there in the particular establishment.
Right.
So that's the difference between a dispensary and a lounge. So it's open to persons to apply to operate either one of them. And of course you need a license to import if you want to import cannabis, and you need a license to export. So I've actually just explained all 9 in that example.
Right, and there's a lot of do's and don'ts what persons are not allowed to do and what persons are allowed to do, which unfortunately we won't have the time to cover. But I know that there are leaflets, pamphlets available at the office of the Medicinal Cannabis Authority on Princess Street. I know most persons call it Princess.
Princess, yes.
Right, so, but it's Princess. Yes.
I found that out recently, actually. Yes, I thought it was Princess. I didn't know.
Right, so that's for those who do not know, that's right there across the road from government headquarters, and that road actually has been opened up now.
Again?
Yes,
Okay,
I'm not sure how long it will be, if it will remain open or if they'll close it off, because of course construction is still taking place on the Printery, and I think I'm not a construction engineer or anything, but I think the Printery is almost in the final stages based on what I've seen.
It's painted now, Ian.
Yes. So yeah, I imagine the road will not be closed for much longer if it has to be closed again. Okay, so during those long discussion that you gave, and they're very good, some points jumped out, and I think I have to mention that, especially as it relates to the infused products manufacturer, labeling, the importance of labeling. That has to be
That's
very
in the
important.
law. The regulations set out that the products must be labeled. It outlines what the labels should contain as well, so that persons are clear about what they are consuming.
Yes.
And in terms of the testing now, who sets the standards? Is that the Bureau of Standards? Do they come involved there? How does that work?
No, that's part of the responsibility of the authority, of course, with consultation with the Bureau of Standards. But there is a component of quality assurance testing and development of those policies that the authority is responsible for. So again, the regulations very, very comprehensive. Sets out exactly what we should be able to test for, what sorts of standards we should be adhering to. So they are very clear that it's very clear that testing is going to be a crucial part of the development.
The word that came to mind is confidence. If you have someone with an illness and they're taking medication, they want to be confident in what they're getting and what they're taking for their medication. So if you want to have a serious industry, the ultimate consumer must be confident of the chain of events leading to the packaging of what they're purchasing. So it's no longer an informal industry where you don't know what you get, you're taking a chance. When you buy from a dispensary, which is akin to a pharmacy, or you buy at a lounge, which is akin to a pharmacy with taking your medication at the place, you want to be sure that what you're getting and is regulated and is approved and it's been tested and it's been labeled properly and you know the THC content, etc., so that you can take it with confidence that is, something that you can take for your illness.
Right.
And also another point, people might say, oh well, why all of these different licenses? I'll give an example. I remember observing in Amsterdam, in the Netherlands, there are bike men. It was mostly men that I saw, but I'm sure there are women that do it as well, that just transport from the manufacturer to the lounges, because it was one of the longest standing legal cannabis regimes is in Amsterdam, in the Netherlands. And there are persons that just do that. So apparently under their laws, the lounges are only allowed to have a certain amount of cannabis on site, according to their regulations. So whenever they need to replenish, they have self-employed bikers who would go to the manufacturer who is allowed to have more and then carry to the individual. So there could be transporters in St. Kitts and Nevis who just have a transport license. They have their security, they pass all the checks, they get their license, which shows that they have a secure facility so nobody can steal their cannabis while it's traveling from the cultivator to potentially the manufacturer. And then from the manufacturers producing the products to the lounge. So there's somebody who could actually just be in that business of transport alone. So it doesn't mean if you have a cultivation, you must have a manufacturing, you must have a lounge, you don't have to be in all parts of that business chain. You can be in a particular part and specialize and take advantage.
Somebody might just want to grow. And
Yes.
that's their interest, that's what they know, this is what they have experience in. They're not interested in making products or doing
Yes.
extractions, so it's available to them for that. But then we see, as we mentioned, the cooperative conversation earlier as well, that if you have a cultivation, I have a transport, the AG is making products, and we find somebody else, or together we decide we're going to do a lounge. This is how the corporation is going to work, and how cooperatives in this industry could work extremely well for us here in St. Kitts and Nevis.
And also, if we learn from the Taiwanese example, the Taiwanese have become the number one in the world in a particular area of making chips. So they take the raw materials and convert it and increase the value, and then they sell it at the increased value. So ideally, yes, there'll be some people who just want to be wholesalers. They just want to cultivate, they deliver, they don't care about what happens down the chain. They know that they're focusing on delivering top quality cannabis from their man. But there are also persons who want to benefit because, say for example, the person who's selling, the cultivator, is selling for $20. The manufacturer is converting that $20 into a $200 product. So you might want to say, well, yes, I'm good at cultivation, but I can also convert it into oil and take advantage of increasing the value. You know, you just have to get a labeler, you have to have your test facilities, you have to make sure everything is order, but you also could get more money. But then there's some persons who are satisfied, listen, I just want to sell for my $20, that's what I'm good at, and I'll participate in that part. And then you have persons who want to be the lounge, the ultimate seller, which is the persons who's selling it for the most. You might want to be just the dispenser, the person who has the doctors and the pharmacists on staff to be able to, you know, so everybody has an opportunity to see where they fit in, and it really is. And I think that's what Mrs. Williams-Knight has really explained today. It's a full industry with different elements that persons can take advantage of.
Right, and that's exactly was a follow-up question. And it's well explained, but a question in terms, as we mentioned, like the dispensary. You use the example of a pharmacy and cough medicine and the like. Would a pharmacy, if they're interested in offering those type of products, would they be able to qualify, or does it have to be a specialized business?
So this is actually one of the areas that we've received feedback on, because under the current regulations, there are very, very strict rules about people being able to see the products, not being able to access and behind opaque windows and things of that nature. Persons have said that they've questioned whether our existing pharmacies would be able to would be able to adopt as dispensaries, or would it require persons having to know specifically set up a cannabis dispensary? So that's part of the conversation that we're having to see, to gauge the interest of the existing pharmacies, or if we're going to have to go the route of cannabis dispensaries being established specifically for that, because of what the regulations set out, that the dispensaries must meet certain standards. All our pharmacies, I believe, are very small, so it's something that we would have to, it's something that has been flagged. Persons have expressed, we don't like that our regular pharmacies would not be able to meet this standard.
Right. Okay. Now, as we speak about the licensing, the question is, very quickly, how does a person apply for a license?
So there is the application. The application is within the law, within the regulations. We are working on getting a Medicinal Cannabis Authority website so that it would be more accessible. But right now the regulations are on the Law Commission website. So if you just go and you search cannabis regulations, they will pop up. But the application is there in the law. Or you could go to the office and get an application. I just have to say as well, because I see a lot of things in the media about persons saying whose application has been approved and whose has been denied, and we have not begun to receive applications as yet. We launched the office in April, and we are right now working on a lot of media appearances, small group meetings. Maybe a couple weeks ago I had a meeting with the organization of Rastafari in Unity as well. So right now we're working on raising awareness, on making sure people understand what will be required, while we also work on some more onboarding of staff and rollout of more policies. So the applications are available, but we have not yet started to receive them as yet. And
persons have accessed them? They've come in and got the application form?
Absolutely, from day one, and consistently. So, and there's staff in the office who are very eager and willing to assist with answering questions as well.
So is that a concern, the fact that none of the applications have been received as yet?
I don't think it's a concern. We just want to make sure that everyone is ready. That's the concern. As the AG mentioned earlier, I know there are complaints about, it's taking so long, but we want to make sure that when we start, we don't have to stop to fix and refix and things of that nature. So we need to make sure that we are ready to go and keep going and growing.
AG, of course, it's a new industry. And of course, persons may not necessarily have the full expertise in all of the areas. Of course, there are some persons here who have been cultivating marijuana, and so they're into their thing. They know exactly what they're doing to an extent, of course, and that is where the standards, as we mentioned, come in. But in terms of persons who would want to branch out into the other areas that we mentioned in terms of the licensing, whether it be the infused product manufacturing or the processing and extraction, etc. Will there be any sort of concessions available for persons to get involved in setting up these businesses?
Well, they can apply similarly to small business persons. They can go to the small business ministry, and they can establish themselves as small business entities under the Act, and potentially get the benefits that you can get under that Act. Or just apply directly to the Ministry of Finance for certain concessions if you need equipment and so forth. It's an industry that the government has sanctioned, so the government's not going to turn its back on it, after sanctioning it. As I said before, the Rastafari Rights Recognition Act already has concessions built in. So in that Act, there's no fee payable for any of the licenses for registered Rastafari groups. Also, they get concessions under the Act, statutory concessions for any tools and equipment they need to bring in to take advantage of the medicinal cannabis industry. So I'm sure that the Ministry of Finance and the small business unit will facilitate any requests for concessions for any potential, particularly manufacturers, for labels and bottles and so forth that might be needed, to get their business going. Because I would like to see us have a lot of manufacturers, persons that create end products, and upgrade the cannabis into something else that can be used for sale and can be attractive for sale. Because we have to be realistic. When people think of cannabis, where do they think of? The Caribbean.
Right. Yeah. Okay. And Ms. Knight, you mentioned, of course, in terms of some of the considerations, like selling, if you have the product and your dispenser, that it must not necessarily be concealed in a pharmacy in a back room somewhere, because you want to ensure that the product is safe. But talk to us a bit about ensuring then the transparency, and that goes back to what you referred to in terms of some speculation on social media, in terms of the transparency in the licensing and the dispensary of medicinal cannabis.
Well, in terms of transparency as it relates to licensing, I think it requires a lot more public awareness and conversation. And that's something that we have been working on. That is something that we have been, asked to do more of from the public. Come and speak to people. Have more town hall meetings. We had 3 of them in May, and we're looking to have some in Nevis in the near future. I guess after Culturama, when everything settles back down. Yes. But we really want to do a lot more public awareness, and I mentioned again that we wanted to have the website because there's a lot of interest from persons who are overseas. And so we want to make sure that our people are ready. So it's not a coincidence that the approach that we've been taking in terms of making sure that who is on the ground is ready.
And in terms of, as you mentioned, the town hall meetings, can you give us some of the key takeaways and what was discussed at these meetings?
Well, the first one was standing room only at the Ministry of Agriculture. It was very well attended, very spirited conversation. Most of the discussion concerned the cost of the licenses. I should mention here that the cost of the licenses are significantly cheaper for persons in St. Kitts and Nevis. So the concern wasn't that, well, there was concern about the cost, but most of the concern, if I could tell you, was that the cost for the foreigners, the people outside of Nevis, St. Kitts and Nevis, was too low. So they were saying, we need to increase the prices, make sure that we remain competitive here in St. Kitts and Nevis. So there were concerns about the pricing. Even though we are the Medicinal Cannabis Authority, we still received a lot of questions about the sacramental rights with the freedom of conscience, and we tried to address those as best we could. But I think it was 3 very good town hall meetings. It dwindled in participation as we went along, but the first one really was representative of the issues that we heard, persons wanting to understand more clearly what will be required of them with the licenses, and it really was a useful exercise, so we're looking forward to doing more. We did Bastille, Old Road, and Utley's. So, and I know Sandy Point has been asking when are we coming to Sandy Point. So we want to do like a second round of town halls in St. Kitts and also in Nevis as well.
Ian, just for context, I'll give you an example. For a Tier 5 medicinal cannabis cultivation license, the fee for a local citizen is $5,000, and the fee for a foreigner is $170,000. That's the disparity. So naturally what that means is we're trying to get local players in the industry. Mm-hmm. And for example, a transport license is $25,000 for a local person and $50,000 for a foreign person. So those are the examples of the types of licensing fees which are exempt for Rastafari groups who want to participate. So you want the traditional Rastafari groups to benefit first. Mm-hmm. I can say that openly because we've passed that by legislation. Then you want local persons, and then if there are foreign entities that want to come in, they just have to pay a lot more. Mm-hmm.
Right. And the locals are staying. It's still not high enough. make it higher.
A Tier 6, for example, cultivation license of 5 acres or more for a foreigner is $4.2 million. That's the application. That's the license fee.
Right. Okay. So very little time left, but I think I'm going to have to just quickly, Mrs. Knight, if you can just tell us what can we expect to see in the next 6 to 12 months as the industry continues to find its footing and begin to run as we spoke about earlier.
Definitely more visibility. That's going to be key. Hopefully we'll be onboarding our PRO very soon, and as I said, getting more opportunities for public engagement and public awareness. The rolling out of the application where we will now be receiving applications as well, and getting a true sense of the interest and where persons are interested in getting licenses on the supply chain. We will be doing training for cultivators and doctors in particular. That's something that we've been discussing and hoping to operationalize very soon, because we have to make sure everything is based on you having a prescription. You can't just walk into the lounge and say, I feel sick. So we want to make sure that we have trained doctors who will be able to prescribe, not over-prescribe or under-prescribe. So there'll be training for doctors, training for farmers, and different points on the supply chain. But I think those are the two main priorities at the moment, and just generally continuing to roll out with the development of the industry. But those are the main priorities.
And the AG, how will the government ensure that the industry remains sustainable economically and also socially? Well,
as I just said, caps on foreign participation. We wanted to local persons to take advantage of it. Environmental guidelines, for example, the Ministry of Agriculture is encouraging farmers to mix use. So not use 5 acres for cannabis alone, but to produce provisions as well as, or provisions and animals, livestock as well as cannabis. So creating that mixed use. Annual reviews of the policies, for example, through the authority. Reinvestment of some of the revenues into education and public health, because as I said, there's a balancing act. And public reporting, as the chair has said, being able to explain to the people what is happening. For example, when the first set of applications come out, the authority might come and say, well, we've received 100 applications, 60 of them for cultivation, 10 for transport, 2 for lounges. So you kind of know where persons are and how the supply chain is, the popularity of different parts of the supply chain. I already know persons who make products informally right now, and I'm sure there'll be some manufacturing licenses that these persons will seek, and just keep an eye open as to what is happening. There's a reason why the board is constituted the way it is. You have government representatives from the ministries that have impacted by the industry, and you have experts from the field, lawyers, traditional growers, scientists, persons who know how this thing works, know the science of cannabis as well, so that you can get a broad perspective as to how it works. And you just, through the authority, just monitor what's happening, and hopefully InFocus in 2 years, the chair and I could be coming and talking about success stories about exportation and 3-4 lounges opening up, and it being a big hit with the cruise industry, and
Right.
fingers crossed that's what we're going to come back and discuss in a couple of years.
Well, in a couple of years, but we'd like to have you back a lot sooner as we continue the education of persons here in St. Kitts and Nevis, and getting them up to speed in terms of what is involved and what is necessary for them to apply for a license and to benefit from the other aspects of the industry. And so my final question to both of you, and we're just about out of time, so if you can keep it a bit brief, is what's your message to persons who remain skeptical about growing a medicinal cannabis industry here in St. Kitts and Nevis? Mrs. Hyde, I'll start with you.
I would encourage people to do their research. I know we all can think of examples of people who we think smoke and went off. That's usually the story you hear. But there are so many people, very well-functioning, educated people who use, and they're absolutely fine. Just open your mind, do your research, and see, and be open to the benefits that are possible.
There was a comprehensive report involving numerous stakeholders, numerous town hall meetings, consultations, scientific input, which showed that a medicinal cannabis authority is a proper authority that you can implement in a modern society. And as I started by saying, in 2024 it was a $37 billion business. It's expected to double over the next 10 years, and we should take advantage of a piece of the pie. Part of the Sustainable Island State agenda is to diversify the economy, and this can create jobs and economic opportunities for persons. That is the idea, and we haven't forgotten that there are persons who are vulnerable, and we've set up the legal structures in such a way that we keep it out of the most vulnerable hands, so that we could take advantage of this potentially lucrative industry. We are Liamigua for a reason. We have fertile soil, and we should take advantage of all of the agricultural opportunities we have to make our mark and to be able to have a diverse economy.
Right. Okay, and certainly as mentioned before, we'd love to have you back to continue the discussion a bit later on during the year. And there's so much there to communicate, and so we'd like to have you. Mrs. Williams-Knight, Attorney General Wilkins, thank you very much for joining us for this edition of InFocus.
Thank you.
You're most welcome. Yeah.
We'd like to thank you, viewers and listeners, for joining us for this edition. We trust that you will join us next week at the same place, at the same time, for another edition of InFocus. Remember, it's your government, your business. I'm Ian Richards.
Join us every Wednesday for InFocus, a weekly talk show produced by the St. Kitts Nevis Information Service, where we provide exclusives with key persons within the government and discuss pertinent, relevant, and interesting matters that affect us all. Tune in every Wednesday, live on ZIZ Radio and streamed live on Facebook at SKNIS Media and ZIZ Online. InFocus, your government, your business.